So hello, NCAE family, and welcome. My name is Tamika Walker-Kelly, your favorite music teacher and NCAE president. And we've heard a lot about the executive order from the Trump administration around the dismantling of the Department of Education. But what does it really mean for students here in North Carolina? So today I'm joined by Susan Book, a fellow public school parent and public school advocate, to talk about the real impacts that the dismantling of the department could have on students here in North Carolina. We know that, of course, a lot of people have been talking about the funding aspect of the money that comes from the federal government, but the impact is so much greater. So first, I just want to know, how did you get involved in public school advocacy in the first place, Susan?
Well, first and foremost, I am the mother of a student with a disability. And so my first advocacy was at a conference table for his individual education plan. And that's where I advocated for one kid. Later on, there was this horrible budget bill with a horrible provision, one of those unfunded mandates that North Carolina just loves to put out. And there was a threat of taking away music teachers, PE teachers, art teachers, our specialists. And at the time, all I could think of was, well, that's terrible. And those are the subjects my son loves the most. And so put myself out there. I found out what the issue was, and slowly but surely, I got involved. And you can't hang out with a bunch of teachers and not learn something. And so what I learned was this one bad budget bill was just the tip of the iceberg of what was going on in North Carolina with underfunding of our public schools and the attacks that were going on in public schools. And that's how I kind of stepped out of my own little bubble.
Well, thank you for telling us how you got started. And I will just remind you, Susan joined me a couple of weeks ago when we went to the Raleigh office of Senator Tom Tillis during the hearings of now Secretary of Education Linda McMahon to talk about our concerns around the potential dismantling of the Department of Education. So one of the things that we know is that, like I said, in addition to funding, there's a lot of things that the Department of Education does that most people don't know. We know that the department protects the civil rights of students. For example, we've seen across this state how the Office of Civil Rights has reinforced and made sure that students are disciplined fairly, particularly around students of color. And we know, as you mentioned, that it has provisions of the work that the department does around students with disabilities. Can you talk a little bit more about how the department has worked around advocacy for you and your son?
So first and foremost, that funding piece is major. Like, we can't just ignore it and act like that's not important, because it is crucial. It takes a team of educators working together to give someone with a disability the opportunities that they need to thrive. And so that is our instructional assistants. That is our general education teachers. That is our special education teachers. And that all costs money. And we need that to keep working for us. And the second part is, when I go into my individual education plan meeting, I know that I go in not just with laws, but with people behind those laws dedicated to making sure that they are fulfilled with fidelity. And that's really important. Not only that we have those laws, but there's someone backing up those laws that's on my corner, right? That's going to make sure that my son is getting the education that he deserves. And the idea that there's laws, but there's no one to back it up is extremely frightening for many of us.
And I understand how the role of the Department of Education assists in making sure that all of our students are treated fairly. And so we know that the work they do is critical to the everyday success of all of our students, including our students with disabilities. I do know that also the department plays a role in recruiting and retaining high quality educators. It plays a role in ensuring that there's equal opportunities for students to participate in things like sports and have different opportunities across the board, regardless of a school's demographic or location. And so one of the other things that if the department is dismantled, because we do know that an executive order alone just doesn't do it, it does require an act of Congress. What do you think as a parent the impacts would be that other parents should be aware of?
The scariest thing is they don't seem to have a plan B. Mm-hmm. As a parent, I don't go into spring break without a plan B. I can't imagine going forth with this massive system without knowing what happens next. And no one I've heard talk seems to know what happens next. Mm. And that's absolutely frightening. The other thing is that the department does some grants that, do things like help parents like myself through things like the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center, right? They help parents like me navigate the system. There are grants that provide that. And the fact that, if you talk to some of these nonprofits who have benefited from these grants, they don't know whether they're going to be there next year. That's absolutely frightening because they supply so much information to parents like myself.
Yes, and so we're wading into uncharted territory here, into the unknown. And I know as a parent of a middle schooler myself, I know that my son benefits from a lot of programs that are in his school that are assisted by the Department of Education. And then even some of his classmates and friends benefit from those programs. And so, as concerned public school parents and educators and allies who are watching, we just want you to know that our work and advocacy continues around this initiative because we want to ensure that we retain that accountability for our programs, that we maintain the funding for programs that assist students, and ultimately that the Department of Education is not just some random building in Washington, D.C., but that it has real impacts on real students and families here in our communities. And so I want to thank Susan for joining us for this moment today. And of course, you can catch her at many advocacy events in Raleigh and beyond. But also, we are taking a stand as NCAE to push back against the federal attacks that we see on public education across the board. And so we want you to visit ncae.org/May1 to join us in NCAE actions all across the state on May 1st as we speak to our federal representatives to protect our public school students from harms and cuts to public education. So thank you for joining us, Susan, and we look forward to giving you more updates to come.